Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hello, hello, hello. So we have two waiting. So let me go ahead and send out the links. Okay. How do we send out the links on this thing again? I think. Oh, you actually send me the link. You send me the link. Great. Okay, I got the link. So let me go ahead and send the. It's all I do. Let me turn the music up. So I'm gonna send the link to the share link to the video. So I'm gonna send the link to the. Sounds good. Okay, well, so we have 4 watching. So I'm gonna wait probably maybe 10 more minutes before I start presenting. Great. Okay, let me go ahead and turn the music down. I have 10 people watching, so I think I can go ahead and get started, okay? So, the name of discussion is Mesocortical pathway, and we're going to be talking about schizophrenia, the relationship between schizophrenia and autism. These two processes seem to connect at the level of the mesocortical pathway. So damage to the mesocortical pathway at specific developmental periods can give you an idea of the cluster of symptoms the person will likely to experience. Some of the newer research suggests that damages to the mesocortical pathway in the earlier developmental periods of life, like before puberty, those symptoms present as symptoms that we interpret as autism. But when we look at these in the context of schizophrenia, they appear to be more negative symptoms of schizophrenia. After a certain developmental milestones are reached, then damage to that mesocortical pathway can produce hyperactivity that you would notice as prominent positive symptoms, or it could produce like hypoactivity that we recognize as negative symptoms. So the mesocortical pathway is a very important structure to sort of understand. So let me go ahead and look at the mesocortical pathway real quick. Okay, medical pathway here, schizophrenia right here. And I think the last discussion we talked about the mesocortical pathway. Let me just show you here. So here's the mesocortical pathway right here, right? Okay. So damage to this early hyperactive damage to this pathway can create hyperactivity that we interpret as positive symptoms of schizophrenia. The damage can also create hypoactivity that we commonly refer to as negative symptoms. The hypoactivity can get to a point where we can probably interpret those things, that degree of hypoactivity, severe degrees of hypoactivity, as a form of catatonia, when the person actually can't move and things like that. So this important pathway is very important. Okay, so here, let me look at his. Okay, how about if I say just positive symptoms? So hallucinations and delusions. I think I can find a better. There's the positive symptoms. Let's see here. Okay, positive symptoms. Okay, so look at this. So positive symptoms, okay, let's look at the entire clusters. Delusions, that's what you think. Hallucinations, sensory experiences. Disorganized thinking or behavior, that's the organization of your thoughts and how your thoughts flow. So look at the positive symptoms. Disturbances in the way you believe things, and disturbances in the sensory experiences, and disturbances how you organize things. So delusions are false beliefs. Two categories: things that are improbable versus things that are impossible. I got kidnapped by aliens, impossible. But it's probable that people were dressed like aliens when you got kidnapped. I'm not saying you didn't kidnap. I'm saying you got it wrong who you got kidnapped by. Look at these delusions: persecutory, someone's after me; grandiose, referential. Things are very complicated. Referential delusions, hallucinations, auditory, visual, tactile, disorganized thinking. Your frontal lobe and should be able to suppress a lot of unnecessary information or distractions, so that you would be able to focus on one continuous train of thought. And hopefully you should be able to organize those thoughts in a way so the whole system is coherent and so you can comprehend it. In the face of schizophrenia, it seems like the filtering system breaks down and you get everything. And you have to pay close attention to patients who have disorganized thought processes because they're trying to express something, but the filter's there. You get everything at once. It's just very challenging to make. So those are the positive symptoms of schizophrenia. Let me see, negative symptoms. Okay. Look at this. Negative symptoms, hypoactive mesocortical pathway. So everything is sort of turned down. Blunted affect, right? You don't expand as much. Don't speak as much. Don't move as much. You don't engage as much. You don't experience as much pleasure. It's like everything is turned down in schizophrenia and the negative symptoms. So look at these symptoms, the negative symptoms, and let's see how they compare with autism, the symptoms of autism. So remember the blunted affect, and isn't it, and then reduce emotional expressions. Isn't that one of the things we say in autism? They have the difficulty connecting socially. The reduced speech, that may or may not happen. Lack of motivation. They're simply not interested in the things that you're interested in. So trying to get them to do something they don't want to do will, definitely show lack of motivation. Social withdrawal, right? Reduced experience of pleasure. I'm not sure if they have that all the time. I think that's probably frequent as in a normal population. So negative symptoms, and let's look at instead of negative symptoms of schizophrenia, let's split that autism. Okay, look, difficulty with social interactions, avoiding eye contact, and struggling to make friends. Communication challenges include delayed language development. So remember, this mesocortical pathway is damaged very early, primarily before puberty. And so the other structures, things like that, I don't think they grow to the same extent. And because they don't grow, the whole system is more developmentally delayed. All of those networks have to develop themselves independently. They all develop independently. So you can get wide fluctuations in how the quality of how each of these networks work. Communication challenges, right? Language development, difficulty understanding or using verbal cues, repetitive speech patterns, restrictive language, repetitive languages. Problems with social interactions, problems with communications, other potential problems, sleep, GI. Okay, so I think you get the point there. Let's see, how long have we been going so far? So far at 15 minutes. I think I'll do the lectures only 20 minutes at a time. Okay. Let me go to, let's see what Google Scholar has to say. Look at this. New therapeutic options for severe autism disorder. Deep brain stimulation of the mesolimbic and mesocortical pathway. If the pathway is damaged, you may have to zap it with some electricity to get the pathway up and running again. So deep brain stimulation, I'm sure the deep brain, the device could probably recognize the frequency at which the network is working, and it can probably sort of reset the network by firing itself. That's interesting. It's interesting. I like to see how that looks like. Okay, recognizing the circuitry underlying cerebellar, mesocortical pathway damage, cognition, apathy, and gait. Cognition, apathy, gait. Negative symptoms of that is autism again. Dopamine dysregulation, autism spectrum disorder. Let me see this. Mesocortical pathway damage in cognition, apathy, gait, and cerebral small vessel disease. Many times I find that I always stay here on Google Scholar, and I subscribe to a lot of the main journals. I don't have it on this computer. But it helps me really put my treatment of the patients in context. Sometimes the textbooks or the learning materials may be very difficult, maybe difficult for me to digest, but coming here to the actual studies themselves are very useful. In conclusion, our study showed that 3 clinical features, cognitive impairment, apathy, and gait dysfunction, of that is strongly interrelated with the damage to the mesocortical pathway and could be a common neural basis of the 3 features. Okay, what is, that's small vessel disease. Yeah, we do see that in small vessel disease. Okay. That's it with that. See if there's anything else interesting here. Autism and dopamine. Dopamine-mediated mesocortical dopamine release influence the mesocortical pathway. I don't want to get into that. So right now we're at 18 minutes. And so let me see if I can take a few questions to see if you have any questions. So the point here is for the students who are rounding with me, that mesocortical pathway is very important. And we see the positive symptoms of psychosis. And when it's very severe, we have to go to the typical antipsychotics like Haldol and Thorazine, because those typical antipsychotics are potent enough to sort of manage the instability in this network. Any questions, though? Let me see if you have any questions. Here, I have one question here. Is the mesocortical pathway something we can strengthen or repair? That's advanced. I mean, I can imagine developing implants, maybe a coupler or something like that wraps around the main trunk of the mesocortical pathway, and with radio waves, that picks up the frequency and things like that. And then maybe you can modulate your mesocortical pathway. I think we're coming into something like that. Yeah, I think it's going to happen real soon too. So yes, I think right now I don't think we don't have the technology to strengthen or repair. We just manipulate the neuron by targeting the receptors, basically. This neuron in many cases is hyperactive, and we block the receptors to slow it down. Okay, next question is here. Is it possible for someone to be misdiagnosed with one and then they actually have the other, or both? Remember, the DSM-4 focuses on the symptomatology, and it's very difficult learning to identify specific disorders with symptomatology that's present throughout all of the different disorders. And then you have to find a certain cluster at the same time over a period of time in order to make a diagnosis, and that's very complicated. So I think our language and our terminology comes from that pursuit to try to gather the symptoms and come up deductive reasoning, I guess. But since we understand the functionality of the mesocortical pathway, I think my emphasis in my career is to sort of focus on the functionality of the pathway and see if I could master manipulating it with the tools that I have. So is it possible for someone to be misdiagnosed? Yep, all the time. One of the things I do is I try to use standard scales like the brief psychotic rating scale, the Young Mania rating scale for mania, the confusion assessment method for delirium, the things like the CIWA for alcohol, CAL's clinical opioid withdrawal scale. So I use a lot of scales to sort of try to quantify the severity of the disorder, and at least I have some type of parameters. Okay, great. Let me know if there's any other questions here. If there are not any other questions, then it's at 21 minutes, and I know the students don't like to wait around for long. So I'll go ahead and end this. Okay, I do have another question. What's the difference between this and the mesolimbic pathway? Two different pathways. This is the one that connects your lower brain, your midbrain, your prefrontal cortex, and then your frontal lobe. And so This is covering that territory on those different lobes right here. This is your mesolimbic, okay, and that's your limbic system, this reward pathway. This is the target of a lot of the targets for substance abuse and everything. We make this pathway hyperactive, get a high. It's low, you withdraw. So these are two distinct pathways, and they serve completely different functions. Okay, here, great. Does trauma affect the mesocortical pathway? Oh my God, listen, narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths seem to have an innate predilection for this pathway, because it seems to me that the cognitive, emotional, and very soft neuropsychiatric manifestations of emotional and psychological abuse tend to manifest themselves in dysfunction in this pathway. So you're being abused, you can't remember things, you can't organize things, you're very forgetful. Your mood is very labile, very can be unpredictable, it can be impulsive. Your sleep can be disturbed, and it seems like these sociopaths, they focus on all the emotional, psychological stress that will damage this. And in fact, if certain hormones like the stress hormone, cortisol, adrenaline, all those, they tend to increase expression of glutamate, and glutamate turns everything on, and then the cells start popping. The cells, the area that's overly stimulated, start to experience a death in the nerves in that area, and so the person starts to show cognitive and neurocognitive deficits because of the hormonal and neurotransmitter imbalance and how much stress they're under. So patients with like chronic PTSD typically have very severe memory problems due to the impact of the hormones and the neurotransmitters on excessive amounts on the actual physical function and networks of the brain. Let's see. Any other questions, guys? Any other questions? Okay, so we're at 25 minutes. If there's no other questions, then I'll go ahead and end this stream for now. And we can talk about this tomorrow if you have any other questions, okay? It's a pleasure talking to you guys, and Reed out. See you tomorrow. Ciao, guys.